In the meantime, I want to go back to the George Zimmerman trial. The jurors are not in the courtroom right now, but they're continuing this hearing on whether or not a computerized animation of what happened in the exchange between Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman should be allowed to be shown as evidence to the jury. You see there Rich Manti. He's one of the prosecutors. He doesn't want that animation to be shown. The defense does. On the stand right now, Daniel Schumacher. He's a computer specialist excuse me, in these kinds of animations, and he's testifying.
Saw two figures doing X at the time Jenna Lauer was saying Y.
There's not any in-court testimony on it.
Okay. There's not out-of-court testimony about it either, is there?
There's consultation with the attorneys on how long he was out there, when he went back in, and when he came out.
Okay, and this is, so again, you're integrating the visual perspective of one witness who's not, has no idea what John Lauer might be doing, because they're not even in the same house, right?
It's not just based on Jenna Lauer's call, which he couldn't hear at the time, but he can base it on when the gunshot went off.
Well, I understand when the gunshot went off, but what you're telling this court is prior to the gunshot going off, or even afterwards, but certainly prior to the gunshot going off, that John Good, visual witness, and Jenna Lauer, audio witness, neither of whom know anything about what the other's doing at the time, that you can somehow match up exactly what John Good is seeing at the exact moment Jenna Lauer is saying something?
If you take the 911 call where the gunshot went off, and if Mr. Good said that he was in the condo a particular time before the gunshot, you have a point when he went into the condo. He has a particular time of how long he was out there. So if you backtrack from the gunshot, you can determine from those when he came out and when he went back in.
Those times, of course, are absolutely not exact. Those were all complete estimations, correct? And right? I mean, John Good never said, I got a stopwatch and I can tell you 30 seconds before the gunshot I went inside. Nothing like that, right?
It's an estimation.
Okay, and therefore it is also just nothing more than an estimation on your part. I mean, you can only put in...
It's based on a witness that was there that said how long he was out there.
Okay.
And how long it was before the gunshot went off.
Here's what I want to focus on, sir, is that animation is very specific. You play a portion of that audio recording in conjunction with supposed actual video or simulated video from John Good's perspective, all based on nothing more than estimations.
By the person that was witnessing it.
Okay. And therefore, by you as well, because you can only put in what you work with, right?
Correct.
Okay. So none of that could be said to be exact or accurate to the point that you can say for certain that that's what he was seeing at the time Jenna Lauer was saying a certain word. Right?
I don't think it has to be specific to the exact word that she was saying.
Well, your animation, though, makes it very specific, doesn't it?
Yes.
There's nothing in that animation that tells me the call is generally going on now, and I'm not sure exactly what part this is. That animation shows exactly and sounds exactly that these things are going on at the same time, right?
Correct. This is a scenario according to witness and evidence.
I'm sorry. Which witness and which evidence that came out in court? Or are we back to estimations based on what attorneys told you?
Consultation with attorneys.
Okay.
On
all right, let's get some Analysis of what's going on right now, because this is extremely important, whether or not this animation, this video, the still photographs created by this Daniel Schumacher will in fact be allowed to be used and shown before the jurors. They are not in the courtroom right now. Let's get some analysis. Jose Baez is joining us right now. He's a well-known criminal defense attorney, represented Casey Anthony, also represented Chris Serino, one of the lead investigators in this trial, in this case right now. Also joining us, Sonny Hostin, our CNN legal analyst, a former federal prosecutor, and CNN's Martin Savage. Jose, first to you. This is obviously very important, what the judge, Deborah Nelson, is going to decide. What does it look like to you as a criminal defense attorney? You think she's going to allow this animation to be shown to the jurors? Because if it is, it could be, in the words of some analysts out there, potentially a bonanza for the defense.
Well, what we're looking at right now, it doesn't look very good for the defense at this point. This witness, and now when it comes to demonstrative evidence, Florida law is very liberal when you're looking at opening statements and closing arguments, because that's not evidence. But when you're actually trying to introduce something as evidence, evidence is very specific and must be very detailed, especially when you consider the appellate record that must be preserved. So in looking at this, this gentleman is testifying that he's basing a majority of this animation on consultation with the attorneys and not necessarily evidence that's actually been presented. I don't see how this works, and I don't see how you can get around the argument that this is improper bolstering of a witness.
And Sonny, I want you to weigh in, because you told me earlier that if in fact the judge allows this animation to be shown, potentially it could be a game changer. It could really help the defense.
Absolutely. I mean, juries love demonstrations, they love visuals, and what better than a computer animation of what happened that night. But I've got to tell you, Wolf, I haven't seen this type of thing come into a criminal case in quite some time. I mean, certainly in civil cases, you see, in DUI cases, you see a lot of this kind of animation. You see the accident reconstruction in I guess, car accident type cases, but the standard of proof is really different, right? We're talking about just a mere tipping of the scales, a preponderance of the evidence, as opposed to reasonable doubt. And criminal judges are really loath to let this kind of evidence in, because it starts encroaching on the jury's job. The jury's supposed to listen to all the evidence, listen to all the witnesses, and go into the jury room and decide what facts they believe, and then apply those facts to the law. If you have a witness basically doing that job in consultation with attorneys and putting together a little movie about it, that's a very different exercise. And so I can't imagine that this would come in, but this judge at least has had a really long hearing. I mean, we're talking about, I think, couple of days already on this, in a couple of hours. It's unusual.
They started late yesterday, Martin, and they had, about 90 minutes before the jurors came into the courtroom earlier this morning, from around 8:30 a.m. local time till 10 a.m., and now they're continuing this hearing. So the judge is giving both sides a lot of opportunity to make their respective cases. Yesterday, Martin, she sided with the defense in saying that marijuana use in the toxicology report on Trayvon Martin could be admitted as evidence, but this is a little bit more dicey right now, potentially a whole lot more significant.
Yeah, well, it's significant for a couple of reasons. Number one, you know that the defense is getting ready to wrap up. They've already announced that today. They said tomorrow is going to be their last day of testimony here. So they are at the ending point. And the problem is they know that there was about a 2-minute gap, really, from when George Zimmerman hung up the phone with authorities and when the first witnesses really began to say they know or could see clearly what happened. Because the real focus has been on something that happened totally in the dark, in which no one really saw clearly other than the two participants that were taking part. So that's why this animation, the defense hopes, fills that gap in the minds of jurors. And of course, it will fill it in a way that the defense says favors them. So that's what they're worried about, that this jury could be sent off with still questioning, doubting that 2-minute gap. And that means it could go either way, and the defense doesn't want that kind of gamble. They want it to go their way.
Yeah, and Rich Manti, the federal prosecutor, seems to be scoring some points right now and undermining this animation as really being an authoritative, reliable recreation of what happened. All right, everyone stand by. We'll continue to monitor what's happening here. Also, we're watching other aspects of what happened today, including a famed expert on gunshot wounds who seemed to back up key parts of George Zimmerman's story. We'll have more on that. We're also standing by once again for new information.